mark Anti-Poverty Week. It was with this extraordinary opinion column by Prue Goward.
They are damaged, lacking in trust and discipline, and highly self-interested. But the poor are still a force that Australia needs to properly harness.
That column drew a massive reaction last week, but for all the wrong reasons. And who is Prue Goward? We'll let the Daily Mail explain with one of its patented fact-backed headlines.
Huge backlash to essay by Gladys's ex-minister and Zipporah Malka's mother, suggesting poor people lack discipline and are appalling housekeepers.
Yep, Prue's the mother of a tabloid favourite, but also a former ABC journalist, a former federal sex discrimination commissioner and a former New South Wales cabinet minister, once responsible for mental health, community services, women, families and domestic violence. And every fortnight she offers her expertise to Financial Review readers on the issues of the day. Last week, her target was the underclass.
Since the 1950s, there has been a remarkable growth in the number of proles. Government agencies view them with alarm as huge cost centres. They are overrepresented in their use of government crisis services and are always the last to give up smoking, get their shots and eat 2 servings of vegetables a day.
Proles, if you're wondering, is short for proletarians, an Orwellian term for the working class. But Prue's column damned them as people with chronic mental illness and cognitive disabilities who neglect their children, are appalling at housework and often don't vote. And wrote Goward, there's very little hope for any of them.
Their children languish in the growing number of behavioural support classes in general high schools where they learn little and teachers itch to send them to the local TAFE to do some form of homeschooling and get them off their books. Once graduated with a basic studies completion certificate and little else, their prospects are not great. The discipline of work and often its thanklessness, especially at the unskilled end, also have little appeal.
Taken as a slur against the poor at large, which many did, it was enough to take your breath away. And even more when Goward claimed,
I like them. I like them because they call us out. They are honestly self-interested, and you always know what they think.
It was a backhanded compliment at best, a sneering exercise in condescension at worst. And as Cassandra Goldie from the Australian Council of Social Service told The Guardian,
it is disturbing that it was published by the AFR over and above the wealth of experts on these issues. This is, after all, Anti-Poverty Week, and numerous experts have sought media coverage on these issues, including from the AFR.
On social media and on the airwaves, others reacted to Goward more personally and more bluntly.
What a flog. What an absolute dyed-in-the-wool flog she is.
And among the chorus of critics was Goward's former colleague, now Premier, Dominic Perrottet, who told the New South Wales Parliament,
I do not commend her for the article yesterday. I completely disagree with it, and I think the entire premise of it was terrible.
And One Nation's Mark Latham was even more damning, calling her
so out of touch, so arrogant, so condescending, so elitist. She's written an article that's sort of out of Pride and Prejudice, sitting there like someone in a Victorian-era parlour room, sneering at the poor.
For once, Mark, we agree. So, what does Goward have to say? That it was all misunderstood, as she told The Guardian.
I have applied a Marxist analysis, which some might say is old-fashioned, but which explains to me why people judge others as unworthy.
Whatever that means. Goward, of course, is entitled to her snotty opinion, but why on earth would the AFR publish it? Editor-in-Chief Michael Stotchbury, who published critical letters to the editor and a response to Goward from Cassandra Goldie in the paper this morning, told Media Watch it's not his role to defend opinion articles, but that in this case, people have, quote, grasped the wrong end of the stick.
Goward is not mocking the underclass. She mocks disparaging government and middle-class attitudes and the resulting relevant policies to the underclass. People are free to agree or object, but in this case, the argument seems to be misinterpreted.
Well, maybe it was, but if that's the case, Goward and the AFR have only themselves to blame. Some media did the important work of shining a light on the daily challenges facing the poor. The AFR, thanks to Prue Goward, gave the impression that it couldn't care less. And finally,